All right, are you ready to roll with it?
Yeah, I'm ready. You
Okay. Got some
know.
more
And
folks
we just got
coming.
another attendee, which is good. Okay,
Yep, go for it.
welcome. My name's Chick Keller. I'll be leading the class tonight. Climate change. I've been teaching climate change for 4 years, and I've always been optimistic. And I thought, well, what can I do to liven up the presentation and make it a little bit? So I thought, well, I'm just gonna make a prediction of what's gonna happen. And nobody else does, and I will tell you, I'm the only one making a prediction. And I haven't read this prediction anyplace else, so, you just go with it. But we're gonna go through a lot of data before we get to the end. That is my email address. It's my name, Keller Chick Keller @gmail.com. And anybody wants copies of the slides, you email me, I'll email you copies of the slides. Happy to do that. Oops. Okay, about me, I'm just a pragmatic old engineer. I worked for Black and Veatch 15 years and taught at KU for 8 years in the Masters of Engineering Management. I got to focus on implementation. I noticed the last class we had, a lot of people were talking about, well, we could do this, we could do that, different ways to generate clean electricity. Well, they're all great, but somebody's got to implement. I was also in strategic planning a lot, where you come up with great ideas, and you can come up with the greatest ideas, and if somebody doesn't implement them, it doesn't matter. So we're gonna talk about implementation a lot too, and how to get there. I get just by reading, you know, over 4 years, I've read thousands of articles, but I read The Economist magazine, New York Times, Reuters, Associated Press, and a few books. I didn't bring any of the books I've read, but pretty much I get my updated information from the periodicals and the news articles. Feel free to challenge me, feel free to ask questions. If you don't believe me on something, you can just Google it. You can Google any question you want, and it'll come up with an answer. Help me find errors. This is version 1 of this. This particular one, about half the slides are common to other presentations. Okay, here's the overview of what I'm gonna say. Everything is changing everywhere all at once. We all know that. And then the next big point is people don't like change. They don't want to change their life. They don't want to do things different. And we're going to be talking about that. Here's the storyline I'll put together tonight. Point 1, this is not a new normal. It's going to get worse, a lot worse. 2, we know the cause, we know the solution. The solution's wrapped around 3 pieces: new technology, I should say implementing new technology, creating new regulation, and adapting. And we'll talk about what all 3 of those are and how they interact and play together. China is the problem and China is the answer. I'll go through that in detail. But we got to work with China to solve this problem. We can't go have a war over Taiwan or something. We got to solve the problem. What will happen? My kind of least frightening statement about what will happen is we're 10 or 15 years behind schedule. You know, as an engineer, you track schedule. Well, what was the schedule? We were going to be 50% CO2 reduced by the year 2030 worldwide. We're going to be CO2 free by the year 2050. My estimation, just looking at the data and tracking what's going on, is we're 10 to 15 years behind schedule. And we'll come to, well, what the heck does that mean? Okay. I put this slide in at the very first. This won't happen in this class, but when I teach for KU's OSHA, there's always one person in the class that is not a believer. And they've got literature from Koch, K-O-C-H, Koch. He founded an institute and he hires professors and they write articles that say climate change doesn't exist. But the trouble with these people is they wait till the last 5 minutes of class and then they surface. and I haven't got time to go through their data and their literature. So I put that up front. This is all you gotta believe to believe in climate change. This is it. Greenhouse gases hold more heat than normal air. You know, that's like junior high science. You know, different metals hold different heat. Greenhouse gases weigh more than normal air. That means they don't blow away. But, you know, they hang around. In fact, the literature says CO2 will hang around for 100 years. So we're stuck with it for 100 years. Fossil fuels, when burned, create CO2. That's the whole science behind climate change right there. Okay. Here we have a graph that's produced by, who's it produced by? I think it's produced by a credible organization. On the horizontal axis, you've got 1960 to the year to present, 2024. On the vertical axis, we have the way you measure CO2 in the air is parts per million. We have the parts per million in the air from 1960 up. And by the way, if you go back to 1850, when the industrial era started, industrial revolution started, we're at 280 parts per million. 1960 at 320 parts per million. And you can see it just going up. And for any of you that have done forecasting, when you have trends like that, they don't change on their own. It takes work to change a trend like that. Also, look at that trend and try to draw a straight line through the bottom half of the graph. And where does it end up? It ends up below the top half of the graph, meaning this thing is increasing at an increasing rate. If you're a mathematician, the first derivative is positive and the second derivative is positive. We're growing at an accelerating rate. This should be enough to scare you to death, if you know people. Okay. So, more CO2 creates more heat. This is just a quick graph from 1880 to 2010. And it takes the average temperature at about 2005 and shows how we were below the average temperature for the first 70 years, and then after we're above the or after we're above the line. You can see it's going up fast. Again, it's a tough trend to break. And you can do all those statements you want. The last 10 years were the hottest 10 years ever. The last 50 were the hotter than the 50 before it. The statistics are all there, and they're easy to pop out. This is just the same graph, but when I looked at it, it looked a little more dramatic. And one reason I left this, by the way, it shows that in 2022 we were 0.89, say 0.9 degrees centigrade above the starting point. And if you remember, the goal is not to let it go more than 1.5 degrees. We're going to blow through 1.5 degrees. If you're a physicist, a body in motion tends to stay in motion unless acted upon by external force. Well, that thing's in motion and it's going up. You got to do something to change it. Okay, why does that matter? Hotter air causes more evaporation. Another piece of science that most people know. More water in the air coupled with hotter air, that is, there's more energy and water up there. That just means more storms and more bigger storms. Okay, it's not just the air that's getting hotter. The oceans are getting hotter. And this is just as scary, maybe even more scary than the air. Every day for the last 12 months, the world sea surface temperature has broken records. It's not just an El Nino effect. El Nino does increase ocean temperatures. Why does it matter if it's hotter? Well, storms, as they come up from the equator, they're blowing up, they pick up energy from the water. That's why the Gulf is called a hurricane maker. The storms come in there, the Gulf is shallow, the Gulf is averaging any place from 87 degrees to there were some temperatures of 105 degrees off the coast of Florida this year. And that's hot. That's hot water. Can you imagine getting in the ocean in Florida and it's like a hot tub? Anyway, so the storms pick up hot air. And Hurricane Adelia went from a category 1 to a category 4 in 24 hours. It's because of the ocean. Okay, and that's the one that blew into Fort Myers last year and caused about 60 billion in damage. Coral reefs are bleaching, which is to say they're dying. Coral reefs are important. One of the ways you fight climate change is you break the climate surge, you break the water surge coming in from the ocean. And by the way, down in Florida, one of the answers is build a wall all the way around Florida. And I was just down there, and I didn't know that it already started, but it has. The condo complex I was at on the east side around Fort Pierce had a berm built that was between the condos and the ocean. And it was like 20 feet high and 40 feet wide, but the whole purpose was to stop the waves. Well, what got me on that? Another way you stop the waves is stuff buried offshore, coral reefs being one of them. And they break the waves too. And it's these, oh, and that's why you see a lot of places, and I saw this down in Florida, you see rocks piled out offshore. And it's just to break the surges. Coral reefs too have a key place in the whole ecocycle or the whole living cycle. And lots of animals, fishes live off that. And it's going to be a problem as they die. Okay, water is becoming more scarce. We've all heard about Lake Powell, Lake Mead, and the Ogallala Aquifer are running down. Key, they haven't run out yet. We're still living off of them. But they will. And when they will, it'll be a problem. Well, what I didn't realize, and I read an article on this the other day, this is happening all over the world. There's lakes and there's aquifers that are going down just kind of at the same rate. And interestingly, they're all still alive, i.e. they're producing water for society, but you give them 20 years, who knows what will happen? You know, they may be empty. Everybody online all right? We're good, okay. Okay, the National Weather Service is wonderful about collecting data. And one of the things they do, and I think they do it for scientific and public relations, because this is the type of thing that people can relate to, and it's billion-dollar storms. They've been tracking billion-dollar storms since 1980. And you can get, have you all looked at this before, billion-dollar storms? You can get it just by Googling billion-dollar storm, and they'll pop right up. And then or you can do it by year. So anyway, this is the year 2021. Notice that, and I'm just going to read across the top the type of things we're tracking that cause $1 billion worth of damage. Drought and heat waves, and that's the year there was a lot of those on the West Coast and fires. Flooding, hail, hurricane, tornado outbreak, severe weather, wildfire, and whatever that last one says.
Winter storm or cold wave.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, there was roughly, I think, 20 or 21 in this year. Oh, and then notice the hurricanes coming up out of the Gulf. Because the storms come up over the Gulf, catch the warm air, and boom, they're hurricanes. Okay, this is the next year. This is year 2022. Notice the patterns are totally different. The drought and fires have gone away on the left side. There's less hurricanes down in the Gulf, but that's a characteristic of climate change. It's chaotic. It doesn't tend to repeat itself, except for being bad. Okay, here we have 2023 last year, and I think we jumped up to like 24 storms last year. And you can see they were mainly hailstorms in the Midwest. Okay, I just introduced you to that because I wanted you to know that there are really good data sets. And the data sets are back to 1980. And here I've got a chart, which on my left column, I've got it by decade. In my middle column, average storms per year.
1983, 1990s 5, 2007, 2010, 13, 2000, the first 3 years of this decade, or maybe the first 4 years, I'm not sure, we're averaging 22. Now, we could get a 7th grade math student to do a forecast on that. Any of you can do a forecast on that, but the 2030s are going to be it's going to be in 30 storms per year unless we solve this problem.
Are these adjusted in constant dollars?
No, they adjust it for inflation, but I can't tell you exactly how. Their websites are quite comprehensive and quite detailed on their mythologies. And it's not just an individual, it's like a whole scientific department pulling this stuff together. So
That's the economist in me that always wonders that.
pardon?
That's the economist in me that always wonders that.
Yeah.
When I see data like this, if it's.
Yeah.
We don't need to talk about it.
Yeah,
You know
no,
what-
I know what you mean. I know what you're saying, because a $1 billion storm in 1980 would be a $500 million storm back then. Yeah. So, yeah, it's a good point. If you go across the 210s, the total cost for a decade, we're getting to where it's $1 trillion cost, the 900 billion. We're averaging the cost per year in the recent time frame, 145 million per year. And you can probably just say we're spending 200 billion on climate change, because that's just fixing up. There's also all kinds of prevention stuff. So being an economist, and you can comment on this, I call this 200 billion of dead capital.
It really supplies a lot of jobs.
Yeah, it supplies a lot of jobs. It supplies a lot of jobs, but it doesn't make people more productive. It doesn't make society better. It just kind of rebuilds society. But you're right, it supplies jobs. And that's one reason it's hard to build a house now, because all the labor is rebuilding stuff.
Imagine if you're an insurance company, though, how you deal with this.
Yeah, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I don't really get to it, but you're right. Insurance is a big problem. So also, I've thrown in here the average parts per million for the decade, and I just picked them visually off of that graph. I didn't have real data. But you can see as the parts per million go up, the number of storms per year go up. And then when you average that parts per million for the whole decade of the 20s, it's going to be closer to 425 or 430, because we're starting to get that accelerating increase. So it's not a pretty picture. It really is not. The good news is we've all adapted so far. It hasn't impacted my life yet. And that's a key point I want to make. You can adapt. I mean, this is awful, but everybody in this room, we've all adapted. We're living, In the words of science writer and author of The Unhabitable Earth, David Wells, no matter how well informed you are surely not alarmed enough. And I think he's probably right. Okay, so solution is known. And we're going to go through each of these in reasonable detail, and you guys can comment as you want. But new technology, adapting and implementing new regulation. Okay, we want to talk about new technology, and I've learned this from talking in courses, because I'll talk about some technology and somebody will raise their hand and say, but what about this? What about that? When you talk about new technology, you got to talk about what stage they're in. And you got to say it looks good on paper. You got a model that works in the lab. You got a commercial scale test going. You've got product rollout. And product rollout is not the end of the game, because when you roll the product out, you find all kinds of problems too. It isn't until you get over about 20% implementation that you really understand what the heck you're doing. And then at each point, you have to go through feasibility checks. Is it economically feasible? Is it schedule feasible? Can you permit it? And there's others. I just put these up here. And then will people have, I just added this, will people buy it? Because there's such a fit over electric cars right now, people kind of quit wanting to buy them. And that's because there aren't enough charging station or whatever reason, but they kind of pass the economic schedule and permitting stuff, but they don't pass the people want to buy them. Okay. So here's early stage new technology. Now I'm going to talk about these on the next slide, but we have solar, we have wind, we have batteries, we have electric cars, we have regenerative farming, and we got modular nuclear. These all work. They're being rolled out and there's problems in rollout, but they're being rolled out and they work. We can solve half the problem by implementing these. If we got these all implemented by 2030, we meet our goal of being 50% reduction in CO2 generation. Then on the right side, we've got stuff that's in commercial scale test, not necessarily because it should be, but because people want them to be. Carbon capture being the top one there. The gas companies want carbon capture to work really bad. And they've got billions invested in commercial scale tests, and they're not even close to working yet. By working, I mean they work, but they're not close to economically feasible. Anyway, these things are in commercial stage. Let's talk a little bit in detail.
Could you go back to that last slide? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What's heated bricks?
Yeah, I just read about this week in the Economist magazine, and I threw it in there because they said it's working. And I had never heard of it either. And simply put, they're heated bricks, but they run wires through the bricks. The bricks are extremely well insulated and wrapped, and there's holes through the bricks that line up. So anyway, they say you can store heat in there, and heat being energy. They say it's a more cost-effective way to store energy than storing energy in batteries.
Okay, it's a storage.
Yeah, it's a storage technology to store heat, and involves insulation, electric wires, and some fans just to blow the air around,
I've read articles on it as well, and it is pretty promising.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Well, if you live in the Southwest, the Adobe houses and whatnot, essentially, the mass of the house holds the heat absorbed during the day and
Yeah.
puts it out at night.
Yeah,
Check what's modular nuclear.
anybody know more about that than I do? Go ahead.
It's actually, they're calling it SMR, small modular nuclear. This is complicated, but anyway, the last two nuclear projects in the United States, Vogels and one in Georgia Power, they were double the cost, double the construction time. In South Carolina, one was just a disaster. And so the concept is to solve these problems, you have small modular reactors, small 30 to 300 megawatts, and you build them in factories, like you build cars, only obviously bigger scale. And there's all sorts of companies around the world are coming up with designs. And what the United States, I don't see any big nuclear projects on the drawing board, but there is none on the drawing board. The rest of the world has cut quite a few, but the idea is, well, what if these small solve the two problems, cost and schedule. There's a lot of talk about it, but what is really needed is a market, somebody that's gonna.
Did Gates just get one working in Wyoming or?
No, there's only two in operation in the world, one in India and one in Russia.
Okay.
And but no one's building a new one. I mean, there's a lot of talk, a lot of.
That's because he worked for utilities. They worked for about 30 years in distribution, generation, transmission. And so, yeah, you're kind of spot on. There are domestic companies that are trying to do that. The biggest problem in the United States is actually the regulation, trying to get it through nuclear regulatory commission. They don't like new technology very well.
So they take forever.
Yeah, that's a problem. And what happened to a lot of these ones that were started in the United States is the same thing that happened to a lot of things. Interest rates went. They killed those projects.
We're gonna get to this point later, but I might as well make it now. in what you guys are saying. In the United States, nuclear just doesn't pass because of public opinion. It's just about impossible to permit. You go to other countries, China and Europe are building nuclear pretty strongly. And yeah,
One more thing on modular, though. The advantage that modular has is it can follow load. And it can follow it in 15 minutes. So when you have wind farms or solar
Yeah.
running up and down, they can follow, which is why modular nuclear is, it's really a piece of this that are gonna solve the problem that needs to be developed.
yeah, I would agree. It would fit in nice if you need some. I just got solar on my house. I'd say just about 8 months ago, and I bought batteries too. And I knew it, I guess, but I was surprised in January when there were days I didn't get any sun at all.
Yeah.
And so you don't need just a night's worth of batteries, you need 2 days, which I don't have. But anyway, solar does have that intermittency problem.
Well, if they would do the vehicle to grid, what the Tesla car has 75 kW
Yeah,
of battery.
Yeah.
and Just a mobile battery.
yeah,
That would be good to have. That will back you up for a couple of days.
yeah. You know, we're totally off base, but before anybody gets creative and tries to don't hook your car battery into your system without having an electrician do it for you, because if you get different, what is it, phases or whatever, you can burn your house down when you get 2 sources of electricity working at different. And people have done that, not with the car battery, but they did it with generators when they tried to boost their house with the generator. And I actually thought about doing that, and started reading it until I read stories about people burning their house down. I gave up.
Thanks, that's
Huh?
what I needed, thank you. That's what I needed, Chick. So modular nuclear is a modified nuclear reactor to meet certain purposes, not a mass nuclear. We're gonna do energy for everything, but a backup made to order in a system.
No, well, it depends on who's the customer, who buys it. There's talk about, the small modular reactor would be near one of these big data centers or it would, they're all different applications. And there's a half a dozen different core designs that have different advantages or disadvantages. Again, it's a concept or multiple concepts, but so far no one's bought it.
Yeah, it just simply a standard design that could be made in a factory that can be shipped and installed fast. That's the idea. 300
expensive to be the first one. No one wants to do. Right.
Yeah,
Well, I'm looking to the international, and the global community and see what they do with this. Because more than half of the designs are in countries outside the United States.
okay, let's move on. Okay, talking about solar and wind. They're good, they work. There's a couple issues. With solar, the biggest issue we've got is permitting the transmission lines. I've actually read about 2 projects, one in Arizona, one in, I believe it was in Wyoming. They're 17 years in the permitting process. And they're big, and they're gonna be out in the middle of a desert type of thing, where it's perfect, middle of nowhere, but they can't get the electricity anyplace. Permitting with wind is getting to be an issue. People don't like to see windmills and they're complaining. Probably a bigger issue with wind right now is people go, well, 50-yard blades are good, let's make a 100-yard blade. But anyway, they quit making the blades bigger and you kind of have to test those things and find out when they break. So if you remember back to World War II, they literally tried to keep the planes tested in the factory to find out when they break from fatigue before they actually broke in the air. And we don't know that on these, as we keep making the blades bigger. The other thing that's causing some technology issues is these floating units in the sea, which are great and they're big and where they're being done, but there's some issues with those things. Batteries, sourcing materials has been a problem, but new sources are found that new batteries are using common minerals. I don't know what BYD in China's using, but they're using common stuff to make the batteries. It's cheaper and easier to get. The recycling issue will be solved. I'm not too worried about that. It's just there aren't enough batteries to recycle right now to really have a big factory, but somebody's going to build it. The cars, Tesla and BYD are really good. I mean, the Tesla 3, you buy one for $40,000, you get a $7,500 credit. So it's $32,500, and you'll save $10,000 over the next 10 years in maintenance and gas. And I can say that with authority because I have a 5-year-old Tesla 3, and that's the economics of it. It's kind of like buying a new car for, the present day cost is like $22,500. If you do the whole present value. BYD, I'm sure you've all been reading about it, but they have cars in China in the $10,000 to $15,000 range, and they're not golf carts. They're 5-passenger small SUVs. For a lot of reasons, we've decided we don't want to be dependent upon China. And so we're trying to be dependent upon ourselves. We're trying to manufacture them all here. I'm really disappointed in Ford and GM. Instead of making cheap cars, they all made $80,000 electric pickups, which are really neat cars. And there's a certain segment of the buyers that love those things, but they're not a mass market car. And we need mass market cars here. And it'll be interesting to see. The theory is, or the thought is, China will move manufacturing around the world, and they'll more than likely put a plant in in Mexico. Mexico has, it's not called NAFTA, but whatever it's called now, the free trade agreement with the US. So if they can just show that half of it is built in Mexico, it can come up here without an import tariff, which will be interesting since Trump negotiated that one. And I'm sure he'll say it's a horrible deal. And they're also probably going to build plants in the ex-Soviet states where there's inexpensive labor, but get over there around Europe and inexpensive states to build in and distribute through Europe. They're doing well. Regenerative agriculture. I used to teach that different than I do today. I mean, we got no choice. We got to do it. And it's because of heavy rains. Because you get heavy rains now and it washes off all the fertilizer or all the Roundup or all the pesticides. And farm fields all drain. They don't flood, they drain. They go to ditches. Those ditches go to rivers. And we're getting fertilizer and Roundup and all that stuff in our water. And it's showing up. And then there's that 6,300-mile dead spot down in the Gulf where some mass of something grew way too fast and sucked up all the oxygen. So you got a dead spot. I didn't believe that. I Googled it 3 times and looked it up in 3 sources, but there's really a 6,300 square mile dead spot. At Lake Lotawana, where I live, a year ago, May, we had 400 dead fish, and we had never had 400 dead fish. And so we hired 2 or 3 experts, the state one and the federal one. And conclusion was it rained 20 inches in May, and all our fertilizer washed off all our lands and all the areas around us that fed into it. And we got way too much fertilizer in the lake, and all the fish, 400 fish died. It just happens. So regenerative farming takes you back to the old style of crop rotation. You don't use the herbicides, pesticides, and fertilizers. Instead, you rotate crops, usually a bean crop that produces the nitrogen in the soil. You have cattle come on, they stomp, they poop, they piss, and that helps. And then you can do a grain crop the 3rd year, and you just keep rotating. Something like all of these technologies I put up here are in the like 10 to 20% of implementation. And something like 15% of the farms or so have converted over to the new style of regenerative farming. And all the ones that have done it are extremely happy. It's kind of like everybody that's bought a Tesla is generally pretty happy. But we haven't gotten big rollout. We're not, you get over that 20% mark, you start getting accelerated rollout and things get better. Okay, removal, many technologies are being tested. There's really strong backing from the oil and gas industry. They're willing to put $1 billion or $2 billion in test projects, and they've got a half a dozen test projects going out there, but they're not even close from what I've read. Modular nuclear permitting still an issue, but both China and Europe are not, they're doing full nuclear, not just modular, but they're doing it in a big scale. Hydrogen is a fuel, it's slow progress, and it's not even close. And then I just read an article in The Economist last week, and it talked about electrifying everything. And two of them that popped up that really surprised me was industrial scale heat pumps. And they reported that there are heat pumps that are cost effective in service today that can service industrial applications up to 200 degrees. And that's a fairly important one because all food processing takes 155 degrees to do pasteurization. And so there's a lot of food processing plants that could go to industrial scale heat pumps. Heating bricks, it's working, and it's a cheaper way to store energy. And I just wrote this, Bill Gates's book is one of the ones I've read, but his theme is electrify everything. And as I read these two, and I thought, well, maybe he's right. Maybe we electrify everything. But I don't know, carbon removal may work sometime. Hydrogen the fuel may, you want to never say never. But because when you throw as much money as we are at those two things, they may happen. And there's 20 others. I just didn't list them because I don't know much about them, but they may work. And there's 1,000 PhD there's 1,000 universities with PhD programs in the world. Every one of them is working on climate change, and they're trying to do research to help climate change. Even if it's the psychology department, they're doing the psychological impacts, or the sociology department. But if you go up to KU, they've got a half a dozen specialized things they're working on. They probably don't fit any of this, but they're working on them. And churning out research. And who knows what will happen? Maybe something good will happen. Okay, that's through the technology. Now let's talk about adapting. That's the Republican approach. It's the approach that Florida's taken. Florida is a strong Republican state. The Republicans openly admit they will not pass any climate change legislation. So really, I'm just preaching their gospel here. I'm not bad-mouthing them. They feel that we can adapt. And down in Florida, it's a requirement now that all new houses have to be built on stilts and can withstand winds up to 150 miles per hour. So you blow all these houses down with the storm. When you rebuild them, you have to rebuild them to this standard. And whoever mentioned insurance made a good point because your present insurance may not cover building to this new standard. In fact, it probably won't. Insurance, build a wall around Florida. That's going to happen. I've got an engineering friend that meets with mayors down there, and he said 3 of the islands, Key Biscayne and the other famous one, I can't think of its name now. But anyway, they're all building barriers around the island, and the goal to save the island. The island of Manhattan had a wall built around it like a good 5 years ago, and they spent $2.5 billion. Today, it probably costs more than that. So building walls around it. Oh, and I told you I saw the berm down there. But the fascinating thing is the Republicans have thrown in one way to adapt is move. And it's just, the move out of Florida movement is just starting, like in the last 2 months. But there's more listings of condos down there. Although, if anybody's been a member of a homes association, you know what a nightmare it is. And all those condos down there have homeowners association. And they've had damage, and they've had things that don't work, and they need to fix them. And everybody's upset with everybody in those homeowners associations. So anyway, the movement's starting. I've read 2 articles on it. First one referred to people as halfbacks, meaning that they are up in the north and they moved all the way down to Florida. Realized Florida, they didn't like Florida because of the traffic, the storms, and the costs. And so they moved back to upper Georgia or to the Appalachia area. In other words, they went half back. So they're called halfbacks. And that has just started. Condo prices in Florida are down just a little bit, not a lot. But give it a couple of years and it could be a whole different picture. Florida insurance rates, I think, are roughly 4 times what they are here, and it's hard to get the insurance. Okay, so other examples in California where you got fires, you're building concrete houses, build windproof houses, build walls, barriers, clear trees, clear power lines. You get the idea. There are ways to adapt. And by the way, we already said it, we all need to adapt because it's going to get worse over the next 10, 15 years. So you don't want your house to blow down.
You think about it though, where we live is probably one of the better places to live with climate change.
Yeah, I agree.
We don't have to worry about floods. We have to worry about a tornado or 2, but we don't have to worry about the sea level rising or forest fires.
No, I agree.
People in Florida was smart. They moved here, except that we don't want them.
Well, I did say that it's kind of, that it said exactly what you said, but what I noticed is we tend to have cyclical droughts and floods. We'll go 6, 8 weeks without rain, and then all of a sudden we'll have a lot of rain. So that's the irritant, but you can live with that. Okay, regulation is more the democratic approach. California, they love to make rules. In things like no new gas stoves, solar on all new houses, all electric cars are required by 2030. Really, the best regulation, if you want to solve this whole deal, we just need a carbon tax. If we had a carbon tax, people would start acting differently because we let people spew pollution for no charge today. And if there was a charge for spewing pollution, people would change their behavior.
Carbon tax was introduced almost 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And the problem was the word tax.
Yeah.
It became a political impossibility to vote for a carbon tax.
Yeah.
So they just called it, a carbon fee or a carbon something else.
Yeah.
Instead of the word tax, it might have had a chance, but once you put the word tax in there.
The thing
disappears.
I've suggested that's absolutely wild is I say, let's get rid of the entire income tax system totally and replace it with just a carbon tax system. And, the income tax system's kind of a disaster anyway, with 100,000 page of rules, so get rid of it.
The biggest concern in the industry of a carbon tax was the fact that, not that it was a carbon tax, but the fact that we're concerned that people would get the money back that they paid in and that it would be applied in the correct areas.
Yeah.
Because historically, if you give a politician money, it rarely goes to what it's supposed to. That's always been the concern.
Yep. No, you guys are on all the right points. You could talk about why it doesn't work forever.
There's a lot of reasons why not.
Yeah. Okay. Measurement and tracking are important. If you want to improve anything, what's the rule? You got to measure it to track it or to improve it or whatever. And if we can just require every business to track their carbon from suppliers and their carbon they put out in their processes, and they're aware of it and it gets publicized, that will go a long ways towards fixing the problem. Because if people have data, they'll try to change the data. And there are some, I think it's the EPA putting out landmark rules that require some companies to share how much they pollute. A sentence I picked up out of an article just this last week was, the finalized rule requires large public companies to disclose the direct and indirect greenhouse gas pollution they deem material, meaning important enough to share with investors. But we're getting there, where people are saying, we want to know how much you pollute. We get those measurements. Republicans want to believe the marketplace will solve climate change. The free market won't solve the problem simply because it's not getting the right price signals. We don't charge anybody to spew pollution. And then further, we make it worse. We subsidize homeowners insurance in Florida, and we subsidize federal flood insurance every place. And those last two government-run insurance programs that lose a lot of money. People people stuck in flood zones right now know their home's going to get ruined, but instead of moving, they're waiting for the flood to happen so they can collect on the insurance, then they'll move. They just figure they're stuck in the meantime. Nobody will buy their house today.
Hey, Chick.
Yeah,
So we've got a comment on here where Al Frisbee says, Citizens Climate Lobby supports a carbon fee with dividends going back to citizens. And he says they've got a US House bill at the moment.
great. Yeah, that does not surprise me. I think there's a lot of action or movement trying to do something on that.
So they're calling it a fee and not tax, and
Yeah,
that's, sometimes
Yeah.
the wording is what's gonna make or break it.
no, I agree. But anyway, with the right price signals, if we had a carbon fee, the marketplace would solve this thing in a heartbeat. We just don't have a fee. It's got to be enough to matter. Okay, we're going to switch to China is the problem. This graph, on the bottom axis, we have the years 1850 to 2021. And we've got CO2 generated in metric tons. And the only two you have to pay any attention to are the United States and China, which are the top two, China being the red and the United States being the black. Interesting points, up until about the year 2000, we were the main producer of CO2. So most of the CO2 that's up there, we put up there. And China's point is, you put it all up there, you fix it. We're still a developing nation. But in the meantime, China is building, as somebody said, a lot of coal-fired plants. Pardon?
Well, it can't be good. It's 2 a week.
Yeah.
300 a year.
Anyway, so that is the graph of the CO2 being produced by China. And notice the United States, what we've done, we've actually turned it down, which is a major effort to turn a curve down. Now we got to get, and Europe has turned their curve down, if you can find it on there. Now we got to work with China to get them to turn their curve down.
So how do you incentivize China to do that?
Well, I'll show you.
Okay.
You play their ego. In the end, what I'm going to show you is they can be the world leader in solving climate change, and Xi can be recognized as the world leader. He can go down in history as being the guy that solved climate change. And I'll show you how you can do that. But first, let's just talk about, here's why China can solve it. Remember, China is the world's manufacturer. They are the cheapest manufacturer of everything. We can never compete with China. Here are the reasons we can never compete with China. They have low labor costs. They have no labor unions. Their typical labor over there makes 10 or 15 an hour. They talk about building a middle class. I'll tell you, they'll never have a middle class because they won't pay anybody enough to get them in the middle class. Our skilled workers are making $50, $70, $80 an hour. They have lax environmental laws, they have lax safety regs, they have easy permitting, because they don't have any of that, they don't have any lawyers, so they got no legal expense. They are gonna be cheaper than us. It's just,
They were pretty much us in the 1950s.
okay, I'll buy that. Anyway, China is the low-cost and biggest producer of electric cars, solar, and batteries. China planners, China, they have that central planning system, and their planners are pretty good at hard goods. So when we're and they're a manufacturer, they're pretty good at planning manufacturing things. They totally blew the internet in the 90s. The top 5 companies all got invented in America, Google and Amazon and Facebook and whoever they all are. But that's because the planner in China didn't know how to write down and build a Facebook. Anyway, but they're not going to blow it again. And they recognized this trend good 20 years ago, and they started building up the supply chains and factories 20 years ago. And today they are the low-cost producer of all these things. Just a little profile on China's electric grid. They produce twice as much electricity as the US. And it's mainly because they got 5 times as many people. I mean, their use per person is a lot lower than ours, but the total usage is a lot higher. China's electric usage has grown 67% in the last decade, which is a lot different than the United States, where we're just flat. China has twice as much solar and wind installed as the US does, and I've got the numbers on these. China is building 30 new nuclear plants. We're building none. It may be 40. 40% of their electricity comes from coal plants, 47%. And that's the problem. And they're putting in solar and wind as fast as they can. They just can't keep up with their growth. China,
Last year, in 1 year, they put in as much solar as we have installed in total.
right,
That's how fast they're ramping up.
yeah, I've got the numbers coming up, but you're right. They're good at it.
You know what else they're good at too, is making sure that their electric grid is stable, which is something we are getting in trouble with in this country.
Okay,
Because that Z has stated that publicly many times, that he's not gonna sacrifice his nation's electrical reliability to save the rest of the world.
Yep.
That's basically where his position is, so I hope we can appeal to his ego, but I have some skepticism.
well, you got to get here's the problem. So right now, BYD is producing electric cars in the $10,000 to $20,000 range. US will never compete on a cost basis with China. Well, I gave you the reasons earlier. Let's go through the US generation the profile. And note I put up here, and this is the first time I've ever said this, our whole electricity generation is really driven by the oil and gas industry. The oil and gas lobby is really strong. They got a lot of money. And what we have done, we've shut down most of our coal plants. I think we're shutting them down as fast as we can. We've gone from like 45% coal to 20% coal. But in place of them, we've gone with gas plants, which are cheaper and cleaner. And so our CO2 production went down a lot because we switched from coal to gas. We're building solar, wind, and new transmission lines as fast as possible, but sometimes that fast as possible is 17 years to get a permit. On our nuclear fleet, we have a big nuclear fleet. I think there's still almost 70 nuclear plants operating. They're all 50 years old. They're all in life extension, but they're working and they're important because they represent like 15% of our load. I mean, if we lost them, we'd be up, yeah, go ahead.
94.
94 plants?
94.
I don't, yeah, that's amazing.
That counts the last 2 Georgia power plants.
Okay, 94 working.
Their capacity factor last year was 91.8%. And
That means they're using, they're selling 91% of what they could potentially make. Yeah. that's fantastic. And the great thing about nuclear, you run it 24 hours a day and they provide a real good low-cost base, what you call base load. They're always there.
And just industry information, the reason gas has succeeded in replacing coal is largely because it's dispatchable and can back up wind and solar. That's the biggest problem, is the variability of wind and solar. It's not that the industry is necessarily against it. I worked in the public power side, so we were no profit motive there. But that's always been the problem, and you know, the grid is a lot more fragile than the world realizes at this point because of that.
Yeah.
They shut down, can't remember the plant in Omaha. And it was a financial shutdown. When they shut that down, and they replaced it with wind, but it only replaced with wind about 40% of the time. The other 60% of the time is gas. So when you shut down a nuclear plant with zero emissions, you're replacing it with gas.
Yeah.
And that never makes a whole lot of sense to me if the goal is to reduce reduce carbon. So, no, it's not true.
Okay,
But anyway, another whole issue we could go on about, but it's just, there's so many, I wish I could put in my head what I know, so you know.
okay. Here, these numbers are really hard to get and to get them accurate. And I had to go back to 2022 to get some decent numbers. And they are directionally correct. But the first thing to notice is look at China's total down at the bottom. 2,500 megawatts of capacity versus our 1,100. Twice as much electricity. Go up to coal. Half their stuff is coal. Ours used to be almost half coal. We were up to probably 400 or 500 megawatts, but we've probably 500, but we've cut that down, switching over to oil and gas. Oh, I got 95. Is that the number you said? 95 nuclear? Oh, no, that's megawatts.
Yeah, 94 operating plants.
I don't think these are megawatts. I think these are gigawatts.
Gigawatts. You're right. They are gigawatts. Yeah, good correction. Yeah, these are gigawatts. Okay, notice that China, if you add their wind and solar together, it's around 800. It's around a third of their production. We're at around 300. It's about a fourth of our production. Our Coke guy can comment, but at the conference of participants last couple weeks ago, one of the goals they set was to triple solar and wind capacity worldwide. And the China guy, I thought it was great. The China guy stood up and said, no problem, we can triple. And anyway, if you look at this, so they got 800, they triple it, it goes to 2,500. That's kind of nice. And the goal works out nice. You do, come on over to us, if we're at roughly 300, we triple it, we go to 900. Well, that would be good too. And those are the goals that everybody agreed to at COPE. Yeah.
Interesting, some of our presentations are overlapping from next month or whatever.
Yeah.
But China didn't sign that pledge.
Oh, they didn't?
And the reason is they say, oh, we're gonna triple, we will triple renewable energy, but the second part of the pledge is to improve the efficiency of your system, meaning the amount of a unit of GPD produced per unit of energy. And they said, we cannot do that. And so they did not sign that pledge.
Oh, that's disappointing.
But they did say they will triple their renewable energy by 2030.
Okay, now, so while those numbers sound good, tripling, and I think we're committed to it, and I think China's committed to it, and it sounds like it solved the problem, it won't. We probably at least have to have twice that capacity. And the reason is electric cars is a big deal. And the other is AI is a big deal. AI is a huge user. The good news is all power plant or all data centers going in. There's a lot of large ones and they're in Kansas City too. So we've got 3 big installations going in right now. The Panasonic out in DeSoto. We've got the Google thing wherever it is. And then we've got Facebook up north all three of those, I want to say with 100% surety, will have big solar plants next door. Because solar is just so cheap. And that's what you do. You can, they'll buy electricity from KCP&L for like 10 cents a kilowatt hour. And solar, if it's right next door and you own it, you can buy it at like 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's a big saving. But then again, it's gonna cost us, we're gonna at least have to double those numbers of capacity as we electrify everything and we build more data centers. Okay, COPE. Here's my one slide on COPE. So you can go to 20 slides and probably say more than I did. So COPE stands for the Conference of Participants. It met this year in Dubai. There is no world legal body. So if you're going to solve any problem, you have to form a task force. And there's been global task force formed before for like diseases and stuff like that. And this one was formed to go after climate change, and they've been meeting for 20 years. This is what's interesting to me is who showed up this year. This is the first time 7,000, we had 150 national representatives that get to vote. And by the way, since this is not a democratic process, it's just people coming together, everybody's got to vote for it or it's no deal. So you got to get something that everybody will vote for, which is pretty general stuff. But 7,000 influencers showed up. 2 years ago, I think it was in Scotland. I think the 2 years is what I'm not sure of. But in Scotland, when they had it, there was the 150 old white men inside, and there was 1,000 young women out protesting. And that I thought was a dramatic contrast. But and there were no influencers. You can tell this thing is getting to be a big deal because all the lobbyists are showing up, and they care and they want their input into the deal. Decided to work. They came out with a general statement about eliminating all fossil fuels, set a goal to triple wind and solar by 2030. Those are the only two I picked up.
Can I correct some of your numbers?
Yeah.
First of all, it's a conference of parties, not participants.
Oh, okay. Conference of party.
Party is a member of the United Nations.
Okay.
And there are 194 countries and two observer nations. That's the Vatican and Palestine. So anyway, those are the parties and they're the voters. And then, of course, then they add, as you said, influencers. There was 85,000 people there this year.
Really?
Yes.
That's showing it's a big deal, which is good.
Well, this was the biggest one ever, and it was partly because they're going to review what the Paris Accords, where it is, and then
Yeah.
also the hosting nation it was easy to get to. It was a first class in everything, and some of the others have been in places that people don't want to go to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the next one's gonna be in Batu.
Okay.
And how many people here know what Batu is?
It's like one of the stand countries, isn't
It
it?
is, it's Azerbaijan.
Okay. Okay. Come next month and you can hear 20 slides worth of information on this. Okay. The stages of addressing climate change. This is a fairly simple model. I'm sure if you get in the psychology books, there's 3-step processes and 4 and 5. I just went with this simple 3-step process. First, there is denial. And if you talk in the United States, you go back to the year, well, certainly 1990, I was working at Black and Veatch, and we were all, we're scientists, we're smart, we're engineers, we're in denial. Climate change didn't even exist, and we were building coal-fired power plants. I didn't really start believing in this stuff till the year 2015. That's when I got into the acceptance stage. How about the rest of you? What year did you guys kind of get into this is a real deal?
50 years, no,
15?
no.
No, you got 50 years ago?
Well, I can't credit myself with that much because
Yeah.
it's more of a health issue thing. It took a while to get to the climate thing,
Yeah,
but I started with Black and Beach Renewables in 2006.
yeah,
So I was well along the path, by then.
yeah. Okay, well, where we are today, did you want to say something?
No.
Okay. Okay, on acceptance. In 5 years, Americans have gone from believing, and I used 5 years because I was teaching 5 years ago, and I just remember the statistic. Roughly 40% of the people believe in climate change. Today, 80% believe in climate change, and 60% believe in the science.
Believe what?
Believe in the science. That the other 40% believe it's just a natural phenomenon you can't do anything about. That's a cycle. So, but that doesn't say they're going to do anything about it. So I take my son and daughter-in-law. They're both full-time professionals. They're about 45 years old. They're both making a good living. They're both busy raising a family. And they don't get too much into current events, and they don't get too much into climate change. And, you know, for the most part, they're ignoring it. They're aware of it, but they're not doing anything. And there's just a lot of people like that in the United States that aren't doing anything. And we need to get, I would say, like, this group is all probably serious and willing to do various things like eliminate plastic bags and compost your garbage and maybe buy solar, maybe buy an electric car, plant trees, quit using fertilizer, all those things. But, you know, the lawn service business is still going big in Kansas City. People are using fertilizer. They don't care. So there's just a lot of people don't care yet. So we got to get to fear. Today, not enough people want to solve the problem. And here's my evidence of this. The biggest issues in the presidential election are immigration, the economy, and abortion. Climate change is not even on the list. It doesn't make the top 6 on the issues. I mean, I've looked at other lists that have different items. In Biden's State of the Union address, he did not mention climate change. Now, year ago, when he did his first one, he did mention climate change, and he passed all that legislation to help climate change, to solar car batteries in the United States, but he didn't even mention it this time. So it's not a top issue. And nothing gets solved in the United States till it's a top issue. You know, we'll have a niche group of people like us that worry about it and work on it. 80% of the people recognize climate change, but there's no rush to buy electric cars. In fact, the headlines recently have been electric vehicle euphoria has died. There's no rush to give up beef. Beef even, this is interesting, beef's up 50% in price. And the reason it's up 50% in price is due to climate change, because a lot of the herds died off because of droughts. And so there's a shortage of beef cattle. There's no rush to eliminate plastics, no rush to give up fertilizer, Roundup, or herbicide. This one I just picked up and I thought it was interesting. Worldwide, large methane plumes from leaky fossil fuel infrastructure jumped by 50% in 2023. I don't know if that's true, but if it's half true, it's scary. In the United States, there are rules and regulations that all coal mines and all oil wells have to be capped. It's fairly common knowledge that most of them aren't, and there's not an enforcement body to enforce them. Probably the good thing that's happening now is you can spot them via satellite, and so you can locate them.
But how do they do that?
I don't know, you know how they spot them via satellite?
Well, part of it is there's a new at least one thing I've read is there's a new satellite
Technology.
that allows, looking at a smaller area than in the past. It
Yeah.
used to be covered thousands of square miles, and that was still pretty good.
Yeah,
But now they've got it down to something smaller where you can actually identify plumes and tie it to a facility, which is new.
you know, even if you find them, that doesn't mean somebody's gonna go make them stop.
Throw it at you.
Exactly.
Part of the
No
problem right now is
controlling
they
the
won't let them
vehicle.
use them yet.
Pardon?
Part of the problem, they won't let them use them yet.
Yeah.
That they're kind of restricted, not accepted, well,
Oh, use the data, you mean?
well, just implementation.
Yeah,
Part of the problem, the closure of, wells and coal mines, whatever, is regulated by the states, not the federal government.
okay,
You got places like Texas that said, well, you have to put up a bond to make sure you can close your gas well or something. And the bond is so small, the companies just walk away and forfeit the bond. And it's, so there's no, again, the states want, I guess, the economic benefit of oil and gas and whatnot. And so they're
Yeah.
pretty easy on the regulation.
yeah. And not only that, oil wells get special treatment, accounting treatment, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a way that, but through our tax code, we subsidize the oil well. Okay. Worldwide destruction from climate change will be severe. I just kind of made this stuff up. It's out 10 years, but I'll bet I'm pretty close to right. 10,000 islands will disappear. I'm hoping those islands China has built with army bases on them all disappear. I think that'd be good. Present flood zones will become uninhabitable. Probably a key point there is about half of Florida is a flood zone. So probably half of Florida will become uninhabitable. Or you won't want to live there.
Everglades.
Yeah. Disease will increase, heat deaths will increase. If you read the stories on heat death, they're just disgusting. I mean, they just make you, you know, I've read stories of people stuck in houses in Arizona where it's 120 degrees. They just die by themselves. Nobody helps them. Millions of homes will be lost, millions of jobs will be lost. There'll be millions of forced migration. Fishing industry will suffer. Interesting on that Idalia storm that came up through Fort Myers, Florida, they had 150 fishing vessels, shrimp boats. They were all uninsured. None of them are coming back.
So I'm reading that the insurance industry is a canary in the coal mine, because
Yeah.
especially in Florida and Texas,
Yeah,
or California, that it's getting so much more expensive, which is capturing the attention of people, because all of a sudden they
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
pay their home insurance.
and that is, you know, another thing. Home insurance, all insurance is regulated by states. And states don't just let you make up a number for the price. You have to show historical costs. And so replace the amount of money you need to set your rates for is based on the damage over the last 3 years. And it takes a year or two to get the rate increases through. So the rates we're seeing today is based on the weather of 2 and 3 years ago. So it's going to keep getting worse. And you're right. It's
Well, insurance is based on predictability,
right.
and when things change, they're,
Yeah.
what rate do you charge when things are changing, but there's an unknown factor? I mean, if you're, as you say, your historic,
Well, right.
your historic
My daughter is an
database.
underwriter,
Yeah.
and just won't write it.
Yeah.
And
You
that's
know-
what's starting to happen too.
10 years ago, Warren Buffett, he's one of the biggest insurance owners or owns companies. He said climate change was that insurers would make a lot of money. And I thought, Warren's wrong on this. I mean, they're going to have so many losses they can't catch up. But the thing I didn't figure on was that the industry's going to get 3 and 4 times bigger because rates are going to go up by a factor of 3 or 4. He's going to be collecting so much money. And if he can just keep the claims under the rates, he will make a lot of money. Never want to bet against Warren Buffett.
The other way, my daughter lives out in Colorado
Yeah,
and, south of Denver, and the north of Denver last year, the year before, they had a wildfire. So people never thought about it because it wasn't in forest, and I can't remember the name of the town, it's south of Boulder, some town just got wiped out. And my daughter said, which is worse than you think, because the insurance companies have changed their insurance policies, where you're still insured if your house burns down, but not if it burns down from a wildfire. You have to get a wildfire rider. And people in those towns think, why do I get a wildfire rider? I mean, we're not, and a lot of people found out that their houses were in fact not insured.
Yeah. Okay, you're getting, I think my last slide, and this is good material for my last slide. Whoops. Well, let me go to the next one. Jerome Powell just revealed a hidden reason why inflation is high. The economy is increasingly uninsurable. And he actually said that, and it's one reason I do not think inflation's gonna die. I mean, we got shortage of people, we got climate change, and we got deglobalization. I think we're gonna keep seeing inflation. Let me see what I got on the last slide before here. What we need with climate change is a champion, kind of like Ralph Nader. We have no champion on climate change right now. We got a whole bunch of people like all of us.
Al Gore.
Yeah, Al Gore was a good guy, and he had his time there in the 80s, and he about did it. He about pulled it off.